And a very good evening, everybody, and warm welcome again to our Lyceum night, coming to you from the Paul Spiritualist Church on the south coast of the UK. I have a wonderful couple of guests this evening. We have the lovely Kerry McLeod. Kerry, good evening, my darling. How are you?
Hello, good evening, everybody.
Hello. And I'm not going to call him Philip because I got told off because apparently he only gets called Philip when he's in trouble. But
Correct.
Which is a lot, actually.
he gets called out a lot, does he, Kerry?
Yes.
Okay.
He's
Right.
in trouble a lot.
Okay, well, I'll just step out of the room here, and when you finish, call me back. So we've got the lovely Phil Dykes as well with us. Good evening, Phil.
Good evening, Lawrence, and everyone that's watching us on Facebook. And just to let you know, I'm never in trouble with Kerry. It's when my mother says, Philip, I shudder because I think, yep, I'm in trouble.
Yeah. Kerry's face is saying totally different there, Phil. I don't want to shatter your bubble, mate, but uh-oh. Anyway. It's so nice to be in your company tonight. Just for a little bit of background, Phil and Kerry were talking to the wonderful Stevie Trolland, and they were talking about working together and doing this for a charity. And it was decided, they approached Paul Church, would we like to do an online evening on a Zoom for funding for Paul Church? And it was like, wow, thank you so much. That is brilliant. And Phil and Kerry are also going to be with us here in person at Paul Church this year. So we will talk about that a little bit further in. But in the meantime, you little jet setters, I mean, I was quite happy going to Iceland. And then I had to go to Sainsbury's and Tesco. No, but yeah. Where have you just returned from? Come on, make us all jealous and envious.
I'll let Kerry talk about that one.
Okay.
We've just returned from Miami, where it's winter. It's a cold 27 degrees.
Oh, you poor thing.
I know, it's awful.
It was absolutely delightful. You know, we met some wonderful people. And the point of going to Miami was through a young gentleman called Robert Lyons, who is producing a documentary about mediumship, and myself and Kerry are the subjects of it. So he had this grand idea. He's recorded many demonstrations that we've done and private readings. And he said, it'd be really interesting to do a demonstration with cameras in the audience to focus on the recipient. So we said, okay, yes. Thinking he's going to join us at one of the churches. And about a week later, he said, I've organised it. And I said, oh, great. And I thought, where's he organised it? And he said, oh, it's here in Miami where he lives. And I thought, okay, that sounds good. So with a little bit of a hop on a plane, and we travelled across and we did a seminar and we did the demonstration, and we met some wonderful people, and we got to educate a lot of people that wouldn't normally go into a spiritualist church. And it was quite interesting to have debates with them and talks to them, because as a medium, it helps us understand different cultures and different people and get a real insight into their mindset. So we cherish every moment we go abroad for that reason.
Brilliant. Yeah, and I agree. One of the, 2020 came along, everything changed. And as we do as human beings, we find, the benefit in things. And the benefit where we are now working, if not in person, but virtually with different countries, it's fascinating with our mediumship on sort of expanding it into. I'll give you a prime example, and I know you won't mind me using him. Lovely Frederick Hagland was demonstrating, and Frederick comes to Sweden, and it was a UK audience on the Zoom, and he had the information coming through, and he was saying about this gentleman went to the summer house and passed away there. Well, the sitters sat there going, no. He said, yeah, I can see that. I can see this going. He had his suitcases and he had a big rucksack full of food. And he got there and he was there for a few days, but then he passed. And the sister's going, no. And afterwards, when I was talking to Frederick, I said, Fred, because in the Scandinavian countries, they all have what they call a summer house, which is a house in Sardinia, Spain, places like that, where they go for the summer. So in their language, a summer house is like what we would call, I don't know, a timeshare or a holiday villa or something like that. I said, because in the UK, a summer house is a shed down the bottom of the garden. I said, so you're saying this guy went down the bottom of the garden with 2 suitcases and a rucksack full of food. I mean, if they'd said yes, I would have been well amazed.
Exactly. They have that all around the world. In Canada, they have summer houses as well, but they don't leave the country. They go off into the wilderness. We have many friends that do that, and for several weeks, maybe a few months, you can't get in touch with them because there's no internet. But that's what they do. That's their vacation. They have these family summer houses.
When you said no internet, I just suddenly thought, oh, I want a summer house.
You don't want to do it. It can be a nightmare. First few days without internet, it's like, oh, what do we do? So yeah, then you get used to it after a little bit.
Live. But it is fascinating, isn't it, that you know, we are able to pick up and assimilate information which is out of our normal scope of understanding. Because what we're talking tonight is about developing our mediumship, is it not? Mm-hmm. So this is just one of those facets that comes in. I was working and there was somebody from America. Now I've heard the word. Oh, in fact, I think it was our charity now. And I was talking about bleachers. And I'm like, I don't know what bleachers are. I've heard the word. And it was in context with the rest of the message because it's the stands in American football. And I went, well, I never knew that. But I thought, how fascinating is that? Mm-hmm. But yeah, we go back to the core of tonight. Kerry, my darling, for you, with your mediumship, how do you keep on top of the personal development side? I mean, we're so busy when we're teaching, demonstrating, whatever, but you know, do you actively work on keep furthering your own mediumship?
I think the answer to that is reluctantly. As much as I'm like everybody else, whenever it comes to new experiences or developing or having a pain or a loss or something that isn't very pleasant, I'm going to run a mile as much as anybody else. So it's not like I walk into personal development, but I know how much it is important to the mediumship. So when something happens, Phil and I usually will say, oh, that's interesting. That hasn't popped up for a little while. I don't think we hear mediums say, well, I was hoping to have got rid of that part or to have eradicated that trigger in my mediumship or to have understood and moved past a certain element of what blocks me. And we'll say to the person, you can't ever eradicate or get past it. What we do is we develop a different relationship with it. So if we have, for instance, a bereavement, then, and children is the prime example for anybody with a child in the spirit world, to communicate on behalf of a child in the spirit world is incredibly difficult because it touches a very deep, sensitive place within us. Yeah. The more we get in touch with and accustomed to and familiar with and friends with that pain, that experience, then we get used to going to that place and using it for our mediumship. So I have to say, I'm probably no different to anybody else. It doesn't come naturally. There is a bit of resistance until I pay attention to it. And I probably pay attention to it far quicker than another person would, because I'm very clear that if I don't pay attention to it, then it shows up. I know that very recently I had a bereavement in the family, and the very next day I did a demonstration and the person that I communicated on behalf of was the same relationship to me as a person that I'd recently been bereaved with. Now, that is an extreme version of using our personal development, but the spirit world knew that somewhere inside of me, I would be able to communicate on behalf of that person. Now, that's an extreme version, perhaps, when we don't know our own emotions, for instance, and you'd be surprised how many people, including mediums, don't know their own emotions.
Yeah.
They have a feeling and they acknowledge it and they move past it. They don't really learn what it is, how to work through it, or what it's telling them. As a medium, we really should be paying attention to those times where we get frustrated or scared or nervous or overwhelmed or whatever that, or fear. Fear is the title we give a lot of things, but we don't necessarily always know what we're fearful of. The fear itself is enough to keep anybody from, and it's a lifelong journey. It's not something you can go to a week retreat and kind of sort out all of the areas that need ironed out. Personal development is a lifelong journey, just like mediumship is. I suppose Phil and I and other mediums like yourself and others who have embraced personal development are a little bit more aware, perhaps, of the necessity to not ignore self in mediumship. If we do, we end up with very, very mechanical mediums who don't really go to the emotional element to be able to get in the essence and give an added layer or depth to the evidence.
Yeah, I agree. Lovely phrase there. Make friends with the pain.
I don't think you can do anything else, can you? You have to understand it.
Yeah, that's a very powerful little statement. That is just like, oh, I like that. I do like that. But it is very true what you said. We do see, and I'm not berating or knocking the movement or individuals, but we often see people will start getting bookings or start doing private sittings. And it's sort of like the attitude of, well, that's it, I'm there. I'm now a medium and I'm working and that's fine. But it's that continuing use these words as well, that unfoldment and layers, because that's been a much in my vocabulary of late. Just peeling, because it just gets finer. The evidence just gets refined and finer. So you go from the in your face. But then when you start getting into the layers, and it's just so fine, and it's just honing down and honing down and honing down all the time. What do you think of that, Phil?
I totally agree. The journey of the medium is one that is very interesting, very unique, and very enlightening. It's something I've always been interested in, and probably a lot of people watching will recognize as they start developing and seeing life from a different perception, will start to realize that they change friends, not because of any malice or unworthy decision that things may have happened. It's because we start to grow and we start to understand life and see things differently, and we start to gain empathy. So we start searching for different truths. And I think as we start to open our minds and open our soul sets to different experiences, we get thirsty for more knowledge. So we're always open, looking for new things. But as we travel along that journey, we start to see our evidence differently. And as you said there, Lawrence, about homing in and going deeper, we start to see things differently. We engage with the evidence differently because we get a different perception. Kerry talked there about hurt and grief, and we have to be friends with it. Well, as a medium, as we deliver those contacts and we gain understanding of the evidence, empathy of the reading and the need of the reading, we start to get that insight into a life that may be outside the boundary of our minds. and we start to reflect upon it, and we can't help but change. Myself and Kerry have always said that if you're doing this work, the person that you were 5 years ago will disappear, because as you progress and gain more understanding, then you change and everything about you changes, your mindset, your empathy for people. And it's one of the things that really does drive us, because we like to travel, obviously, and we're very lucky and fortunate. And this is one of the things why we do like to travel, because we get to see different cultures and experience them. And Kerry talked there about losing children, and I would hate to be in that club, if you will. I'd hate to, as a parent of 3, hate to have lose one of my grown-up children, and it's something none of us want. But when we travel all over the world, we come to an understanding that when we lose people here through accidents or results of misfortune, when we travel to different countries, there's different types of passing and accidents and happenings, I'll be polite there. And you get to see things, and you sort of see these people with amazement that they're so strong to carry on living and try and fulfill a life, but also honor the memory of their children. And for me, my heart goes out to those people. But when we start to understand grief and loss and how individual it is to all of us, for me, it's fascinating, because it makes me look at the evidence differently, the understanding of that reading. And we often, myself and Kerry, talk about things afterwards, how it affects us, how it makes us think and feel. So I think there's always a development going on within the medium, and it also makes you look at your evidence in a different way. Now, myself and Kerry, we talk about evidence in the classes and things that we do, and we talk about it being like an iceberg. We see this top line of the iceberg above the water, and as we all know, underneath there's a volume of that iceberg that's probably tenfold of what we see above. And it's the same with the evidence. So the more that we progress, the more that we understand, then the more unfoldment there is of that evidence. And that's all through the gainment of knowledge, through experiences of life, of culture. And Lawrence, you mentioned before technology. Back in 2019, before the pandemic, myself and Kerry were demonstrating online. We were doing theatre demonstrations that were streamed all over the world. And when it was first mentioned, we laughed about it. We thought, it can't be possible, it's absurd. But actually, when we started to get emails and messages about it from people from many different countries, we thought, this is a new way of reaching. And it's through those interactions, again, we got further unfoldment and knowledge of a personal development. And I think it's one of the big drivers that myself and Kerry have about understanding our mediumship and wanting to further it. And I think it's very addictive for a medium to learn more and more and more if we possibly can. So my thoughts are, what you said before, and you're not being derogatory about everybody, I think people should get an education, not just in mediumship and spiritualism, but in grief, understanding different cultures, different ways. And as you quite correctly said, certain words mean different things in different cultures. So there's a whole new learning of the English language, if you will. So for me, it's a personal development from start to finish, because we believe that mediumship is a byproduct of who we are.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. And again, not being derogatory, but often before 2020, I mean, our mediumship's always going to be a lone journey, but it need not be alone, if that makes sense. You know, with both of you, your unfoldment in your mediumship has been peculiar to each of you. But you are in that wonderful position where you can just say to each other, what the heck, you know, this, where am I going with this? Why would this be coming in? And that avenue of being able to talk about it with other people suddenly opened right up when we got used to going online. We got used to going out and talking and demonstrating. But then this side effect came in, nights like this and many others of a similar energy, and just connecting with people as well, and just say, do you know what, there's something weird going on with my mediumship. It's just sort of like, for some reason, what do you think? And suddenly we are able to sort of like make some major steps forward, instead of just probably what we did before 2020 was just ignore it and just think, oh, stop changing the way I work.
I think there's this, what you've just said, Lawrence, just get on with my mediumship and don't interfere with it. We are often referred to, not just Phil and I and yourself, but other tutors as well, that we've broken somebody's mediumship. We haven't broken it. What we've done is we've allowed the person to take that deeper journey into themselves. When Phil and I both came to mediumship through different routes, as did most people that yourself, Lawrence, and the people that are here. When we arrived working together in 2017, I already had my degree in counselling and psychotherapy. I was a transformational coach. Phil then underwent that training. I'd already begun to incorporate the personal development aspect and that insights and that awareness of self into the mediumship training I was developing. And it's nothing new. We've spoken about personal development in mediumship for eons, for decades, for generations of mediums. However, what I saw was the shortfalling was that there were no tutors actually giving the personal development tools and avenues to actually have a look at themselves. There was a lot of talk about it, and there's even more so now, but there aren't the tools or the tutors or the exercises that allow people to safely, in that safe environment with people who know what they're doing. There are very many people out there that will open a can of worms within a student and then not know what to do to try and get the worms back in. You can't. Yeah. When you have opened a place within a student of mediumship, the tutor has to be willing to do that journey until all those strands of what lay within that tin or that can or that space have in some way been understood. So it is a commitment and a dedication to the students that Phil and I have, that over the last 4 years, especially online, we have those regular contact with people. Even people, a lot of our mentoring sessions now are done with people we only see 3 or 4 times a year. They come back, they say, oh, I've done exactly what you said. This has happened. That scrape happened. There was a car crash here, metaphorically. I got really spiritually depressed here. I understand it. Now I need some help in negotiating and navigating through it. And we'll do that. That's what mentoring is about, not just about the mechanics of mediumship, the formal training, but being there through the journey of the medium's learning. Because if we think about it, the training we do on courses and classes probably equates to about 30 or 35% of the medium's learning. The rest happens when they start using their mediumship, when they test drive their mediumship. And it's at that point the tutor really needs to be on hand, not to hold hands, but to offer the support and guidance and be there as a mentor, as they did, as you know, Lawrence, in the olden days, where tutors really were mentors, lifelong mentors, and always there in the background should the student need it.
Can I jump in on that point just for a second?
Go on, then.
You'll get used to me, ladies and gentlemen.
Jump in, Lawrence. We'll still be here in 20 minutes. It's an ongoing joke.
Oh, okay, then. No, you can't then, Phil.
Okay, I should have. No. It's a very short thing. For 25 years, I've been developing as a medium, and I know I'll be developing all the rest of my life. And as I explained before, that journey of the medium and what we go through, Well, I've always known there was something missing. And several years ago, when I got talking to Kerry, it's probably longer than that, but in 2017, I witnessed Kerry coaching somebody. And at first I was very uncomfortable because it was a live audience and two people at the front, Kerry, coaching them through, asking them some really difficult questions, and really hard questions, I thought. But to see people open up to really be honest and to answer these questions, and I learned some really powerful questions that are very, very simple. So how does that feel? And all of a sudden, people go within and start to talk about their feelings, how it's made them feel, what it's caused within them. And all of a sudden, the penny dropped. I thought, this is what's missing. This is what I've been looking for. So as Kerry said, I went through that training and I got to see these wonderful people develop on a personal level. And again, those wonderful questions of what does it feel like? What would that look like? So explain to me that, and it's getting them to the recipient to do all the work as you coach them. And it's an amazing journey to sit back and watch, because we can see clearly what's going on. And we don't want to say, well, this is what you should do, advise them. They've got to come to their own decision. And working through the session, you see this unfoldment of people, this wonderful expression of who they are and a truth that they've been denying themselves. And it was about a year ago, a student said to me, well, I don't want to do that work. We have a term here in this country called spiritual bypassing. And I said, well, what a shame you're not going to gain understanding and empathy of your evidence and understand how it affects you and changes you. And you could see them question, do I need to do that? And I left it with them. They said, I've been thinking about what you said, and I've started to look at it, and I noticed my mediumship is changing already. My boundaries of my mind are opening to different things. What have you done? And I said, haven't done anything. I've just asked a question and you explained something and you went away and reflected. And from that reflection, you found these pearls of wisdom that have helped you look at things in a deeper level, not making you relive things, but actually understanding things, that these self-limiting beliefs that are getting in the way. Because we hear many people saying, oh, I'm blocked, I can't go there. Well, nobody's blocked. That word doesn't exist. It's just a willingness to look at and understand, not relive, but understand what they've gone through, that opens this beautiful doorway to wonderful understanding of self. Because mediumship is about not just proving life after death, but it's about inspiring the living. And the more that we can understand self and help self, then the more chance you have of helping somebody else that's in front of you.
Yeah.
Short story over with. There you go.
Beautifully put. People on a generalization think, and we touched on this before we went live, that as mediums, we're quite happy and we can cope with everything, because we can talk to the dead. And then messages become devalued, oh, that was lovely, thanks, and walking out without actually taking on. But we're always expressing this, spiritualism is about living. It's not about the dead. It's about living. It's understanding the value of this life here, your power in the now. Why are you here? And following on from that, as mediums, it's just logical that we embark on that journey. How can we teach something that we haven't experienced? How can you tell somebody what an orange tastes like if you've never tasted one? So there is this onus on us that, great, I'm going out, I'm getting bookings, I'm doing whatever, but I need to keep on. And I fully agree with you, Kerry. There's fight or flight. So Kerry, you're flight and I'm fight, because my heels go in and go, nope, I've done it this way for years, leave me alone, I'm not doing it. I do expand. And it does, as I say, the medium's journey is, you said there, Phil, we never stop learning. Never, ever, ever. I once had in a message, and I found it fascinating, because it was I believe, a father, and apologizing because the last few years of life things got a little bit difficult. But he said something. He said, "My passing was part of my life's journey." And afterwards, I thought, I have never ever thought of that. I have never ever even just considered that. And that starts to open up and unfold other things coming in. So, yeah, I agree. You perfectly said, both of you. You know, we are continually unfolding. We are continuing, but not only to learn how to communicate with the spirit world, how to communicate with our world.
And I think there is an element that people will refrain from experiencing. Not everybody has a parent in the spirit world, or a sibling, or a partner, or a child. They've maybe got aunts and uncles they weren't very close to, or grandparents they don't really remember an awful lot of. And we don't hold people in this space for long because it becomes too overwhelming and painful. But there is a merit in asking people to imagine what it would be like if their loved one went to the spirit world yesterday. What that pain would be like. And suddenly they get a glimpse. We can't hold people there too long because it's just too painful to imagine your parents, your partner, your children, your significant other in the spirit world, or your pet in the spirit world, because it hurts like mad.
Yeah.
Why would we voluntarily walk into an experience that hasn't happened? But in a way to understand what it is like for somebody with that level of grief, we have to in some way offer our own hearts into that experience and imagine momentarily, and then have the luxury of coming back into today and still having that person here, and in some ways being able to appreciate every moment that we have. But what happens, even in a bereavement of any member of the family, life gets that quick that when we vowed to make every moment count, and to tell those that we love them, and to make sure we see people as often as we can, often the fast world gets in the way, and before we know it, there's a month gone by and we haven't really done what we said we would do. So it's about being present in the moment, and remembering to make life count. It's very easy to say it. It's much more difficult to remember to do it.
Yeah, I agree. Over to you, Phil.
I think what you said before were mediums talk in general about grief. I don't think any person is excluded from grief. It hits us in different ways. And I found it very interesting what you said, Lawrence, about the life journey. The passing was the life journey, and how it went on and how it goes. I think sometimes as mediums, we forget how it is for that person passing and what they go through, an incredible journey of strength, because if they know that that journey is happening and there's that one outcome, to be able to hold things together, to say their goodbyes, to go through lots of different emotions and struggle with it. And at times you'll be worrying about the person that you're leaving behind, as well as your own emotional thing of what you're losing, that interaction. So there's that side of things. But I also think, looking at it from the recipients, those family members that are sat around, I think that's incredible difficult journey as well, to see that loved one pass away and to be there by the side to go through that journey. And as Kerry rightly said, we can envisage what it would feel like, but until we go through it, we'll never know how different it is. And that journey, again, is individual, that we go through lots of different pains, anguishes, anxieties, and wanting the best for our loved one, and then hoping that they're pain free. So that there's a real journey there. And fortunately, I've been the medium that's delivered both of those types of contacts, from the spirit world where somebody's explained their passing to put their loved one's mind at rest, or the recipients wanted to know that information and talk about it. And Lawrence, you mentioned there that the pandemic, and for those 4 years, I think it needs to be said, and I'm going to include majority of mediums, that a lot of work that goes on pastorally behind the scenes that's not credited for, that they've sacrificed time for, just talking to people, going through that process. I think it's incredible for the work they're doing for the spirit world. You mentioned spiritualism. I like to call it being spiritual. And they gain an education from it, even though it's not a pleasant education. They get to see the ins and the outs, and what's behind the scenes, not just, I've got your mum here and I know she passed quickly and I want to say she's all right. You get the full story. And that, for me, is that unfoldment of your emotions. And again, for me, mediumship is far more than just the contact. It's the mastery of your emotions, to be able to understand how emotionally you think, mentally you perceive things and think, and what comes in, and also physically the reaction. We've got to remember that grief touches in many, many different ways, and grief is a loss, whether it's a child's toy or whether it's a loved one that's passed. It's such a journey that I'm an advocate for people looking into grief and studying it in a professional way, like the grief recovery method, because I think it will help many mediums understand what somebody's going through and how they will feel about it. So,
very true. And if I may bring this in, Leslie Manning. Good evening, Leslie. And she's saying her mother has not long passed. She said her goodbyes. It was painful on both sides. I'm still anxious about her death. We sat with her. I'm a medium and it's painful. Yes, it is, Leslie. However, it's refreshed my empathy for grief and definitely changed me for the better. The funeral was the end of last month, so it's still very raw. Well, first of all, Leslie, obviously, thoughts out to you and Mum and all the family. We were talking before we went live on air, and it can be quite a misconception with a lot of people that as mediums we don't get affected by grief, because we can, in the public's view, pick up the phone and talk to them the minute. And it's not, if we know that is not right at all. But yeah, beautifully put. Thank you, Leslie, for sharing that.
I think there's that element. Thank you, Leslie, for sharing. It's incredibly difficult to often share that grief, and you've put it beautifully there, and you've been incredibly honest as well. So thank you. There can be that misconception, Lawrence, as you said, that we don't feel grief. In some ways, we are relieved in some way and assured because we know where our loved ones have gone. But if we look at what grief is the loss of the physical presence of somebody that is no longer there. Now we can grieve people and places and things and experiences. We can grieve not getting the holiday, or we can grieve not getting the job that we thought we would. It's still grief. There's many types of grief. But when we talk about the grief of a loved one to the spirit world, we're really talking about the pain that the individual feels. And just because we know where our loved one's gone does not diminish in any way the heartfelt pain that comes. And Leslie's saying that her mother's passed. Losing a mother is tough. And so not having her physically there, Leslie, I can imagine, is very tough for you. So thank you for being honest. Grief is about not having them physically there.
Yeah. And this is part of, we start to really comprehend the privilege of working the way we do with the phenomena of evidential mediumship, because we are privileged just to be part of that journey of the spirit and the spirit incarnate, and just to bring the two together just for that short time. And that is a huge privilege to me. It's a huge privilege that when you have got that communication is flowing exactly right, and you can feel the healing both sides of the veil, this side and in spirit. It's a huge honor and privilege to be able to bring that in and to be part of that journey just for that short time.
It is. I think you absolutely spot on there, Lawrence. Mediumship, when it's done properly, is an incredibly inspiring and healing comfort to people, and that's why we're big advocates for it. And again, it's one of the big reasons we agreed to be within this documentary, the film Evidence of the Afterlife. I think that if we look at life, it's an experience, and we experience so many different things of memories, emotions, interactions, from work to family to people we meet. And I think as we demonstrate, and it's my way of looking at it, mediums are storytellers, and they're telling the story of life. And I think for those that read books, as we read a book, some contacts can be like the foreword of a book, are short and concise, and the surface of what the book's about. But if we do our jobs properly, then we're taking people through down memory lane. We're reminiscing, we're rejoicing in that story of how those loved ones, the mother, the father, the brother, the sister, the sons and the daughter, lived, and all those memories that we shared, from holidays to personal interactions in the household and throughout the family. So where I say it's like a good book, we're delivering that evidence as like chapters, and each piece of evidence needs to be unfolded to tell the story of that chapter that leads on to the next. It should be a continuation. And I remember somebody saying a few years ago, a very brand new person had come into a spiritualist church and said, I'm coming back next week because I want to hear the rest of that story. And we had to explain it was just in that moment. So as we read books and we envisage and we imagine and we transport ourselves to the storytellers' writings and experiences, and we can see it, hear it and feel it, that's what mediumship is. Because if we tell the story properly, everyone can follow it, but the recipient's taken to those specific memories to help them with that need, why they've come and why they need that message. But mediumship and that story does far more. It reminds people of other memories as they reflect within that memory. So all of a sudden, they've got these other memories and things that they've forgotten. As Kerry said quite rightly, life is fast, life is busy. So once we have that cathartic experience with that contact and those memories, it opens the floodgates to many more. And that really brings that inspiration to let us know that our loved ones are still there. But how they've inspired that person is incredible, because it can just lift somebody and change their whole, not just day, but life.
Yeah. And the basis of virtually every aspect of the phenomena of, or the philosophy of spiritualism, is healing in some form or another. We are talking about healing. I was privileged to see, we had a demonstration here last night, and the message flowed, the evidence was very good, the medium has a great bubbliness, and there were some the funny things in there which everybody laughed and enjoyed. Beautiful message. But do you know what? It was the very last thing that was said that was the most important part. Because just as she was, just letting go and moving on, she went, oh, she said to tell you, I'm all right. And that meant the world to that person, because that was the one thing that they were still struggling with. You know, I'm dealing with the loss. I'm learning how to live with the loss. I'm learning how to live with the absence. But are they all right? Are they all right? That was, you know, it was sort of like become a fixed point. And hearing that on top of that volume of evidence, she went out and she went, my God, she said, I feel like a weight's been lifted off my shoulder. I didn't realize how much I was worrying about her over there. And it's just amazing. Absolutely. We have the lovely Jack from Denmark. And he's saying, I've often heard, oh, it must be easier for you with your loss. You can speak to them. I can only respond, not easier, but different. The knowledge and presence of their spirit is also a reminder of the lack of their physical presence.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, it's one thing to know they're well. It's one thing to know that they are in a new vibration, a new existence, which is active. You know, we're not sat around on clouds going plink, plink, fizz. We're actually engaged with things. We're doing things that we can't even imagine in this earthly vibration. But we still want them next to it. We still want to be able to turn and look them in the eyes and just go, how are you?
I think it's difficult too when the person that's left here after their loved one has transitioned to spirit, when they didn't say, I love you, or they didn't get the chance to clear the air, or they didn't have the opportunity for their loved one to tell them something. There's so many people go to the spirit world with secrets about family that the loved ones left would like to know. There's so many words left unspoken, and we always think we've got tomorrow. That's a thing with humans. We always think there's a tomorrow. We always think, I'll do it tomorrow. And then the person walks out the door and never walks back in that door.
Yeah.
We have to really grab the moment and not get caught up in the physical life, because the physical life is fleeting. I know it's okay to say, oh, well, it's an experience, we'll all meet together afterwards. But one of the human experiences is grief. And one of the big lessons for a person is to be able to open their hearts and say, I love you, or I'm sorry, or you're forgiven, or please forgive me. That's part of the human experience, and not everybody gets the opportunity to say that. And they truly believe that when their loved one or friend goes to the spirit world, that opportunity is lost.
Yeah.
The medium sometimes gives them that reassurance that they can do that any minute of every hour, of any day, of any month of every year. They can do it on their own, that their loved one is close by and can hear them. So that weight being lifted off them when they leave the spiritualist church is, I suppose, in some way, I would imagine, because they now know their loved one is still there and can see and hear them and can hear their thoughts and say it's okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
I agree with Jack. I've often heard, and it's been said to us both, and I'm sure it has been said to you, Lawrence, it must be easier. Well, we have that belief they've gone to the spirit world. We know they've gone there, and we have that faith, but we still suffer that physical grief. Very recently, we've lost somebody, and it was only yesterday, driving in the car by myself, tears rolling, because the pain that you've lost somebody, they're no longer in your life. It's definitely not easier. It's a little different because of our understandings, and we do get that contact. Maybe as we still grieve, we're not ready for those full sentences and things that we hear occasionally with other people's loved ones, but I'm sure it will come. It is, as Kerry said, that lack of the physical presence, that you can't go and speak to them or ring them up or just have that general chat. That's what hurts. It leaves a big hole.
Yeah, true. And when we have those cases also, sadly, you do hear this all too commonly. You talking to somebody here in the physical, and you might mention ex-partner, family member, whatever, and instantly the hackles have gone up, and you get, do you know what, 20 years ago they said to me, and you just think, oh my goodness, why are you keeping that alive? Why are you keeping that energy still in your energy? Because it's not doing you any good. And grief is the big leveler. Grief is the thing that just shows all these things up for what they are, which is nothing.
And interestingly enough, Lawrence, when mediums have come to us, mediums that have been working sufficiently in their own right, what puts them off course and what gives them the block is their first experience of severe grief. Because they don't know how to cope with it. They've talked about it and they've taught about it and they've shared what we should do. But you're right, it's a great leveler. Everybody has to accept that grief will floor us.
Yeah. And Leslie Manning, and she's commenting, my faith gave me comfort. I'm waiting to see Mum. Not so easy, even if you're a medium. I've just got to wait. Mediums have grief too.
Correct.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, over the years, I've had some fortunate experience where I've seen some of my loved ones always at the appropriate time when I've been in need. That's when. I mean, we can talk about some wonderful spiritualists, people like Albert Best that lost wife and child and things, and saw them and heard them just a couple of times. I think we're very fortunate. I think there's a perception out there that we are always in touch with the spirit world. Our loved ones are always around us. It's not like that. There has to be a need at times, and that need can just to be felt love, not just a message. So I think we have to open our minds to understand grief. And I know you mentioned a particular person there where they were hanging on to things. Grief can affect us in so many different ways, and some people want to keep hold of they're frightened of letting go of the grief. They don't know what's going to unfold. So grief can be a very scary place, and we need to understand it, and we need those professionals out there to help us move through that labyrinth of feelings and emotions.
Yeah. We have a monthly bereavement group here, meets in the church, and we have a qualified grief counsellor will take that. And I talked earlier, and I don't use this word lightly, it's a privilege to sit in those sessions when I do, to hear the story unfold, to hear and be, because you're there with them. Correct. You're not a third party observer to the event, you're actually there with them. And you can see the way the grief manifests or may unfold, may come out through laughter, tears, anger, all the classic byproducts. But once we start on that grieving process, it is a whole new life for us left here. It's a whole new life because we've got to adjust. I just felt, I picked this up. And there's just everywhere it just sort of like hits us. And it takes that time, but we need to go through that process. And, I'm sure you've experienced this as working mediums as well. Somebody who is very recently bereaved has approached and said, I need to speak to them. And it's like, well, it's very unlikely, because if you can come straight away to a medium and speak to them, are we not denying you your grieving process?
I think in every individual is different. And as you were saying that, I think there's times when we've delivered contacts from people within minutes of them passing. And again, grief affects us all differently. Grief can be, when we get the contact, it can doesn't permanently heal, but it gives you a sense of faith and understanding and relief that they're fine and well, as you explained earlier. But sometimes grief can make us angry. So even the best medium in the world delivering the best evidence, if the person's not in the right space, then it can have the catastrophic effect. And I've seen that with people in grief. Many years ago in a demonstration where I was delivering somebody's husband and coming through, and all of a sudden I just felt a wave of emotion, and I just took a second to gather the impressions, and I stopped the contact and I said, my dear, you're not ready for this contact. You just want to know that they're fine and well, and I'm going to honor that. And she just nodded and bowed her head and thanked me for it. That understanding is when somebody's ready is just as important as the medium's presentation and ability. We have to have that empathy of understanding. And unfortunately, in the past, I've worked with people where I've been very, very delicate, and as soon as I hand over to them, they jump in with those proverbial size 10s and cause havoc. And I've refused to work with people like that in the past. So again, I think an understanding, an empathy, and a personal experience will help everybody understand it in their own way and have more empathy for what somebody else is going through. And this brings us to another conversation that myself and Kerry had recently about just listening to people, but listening to understand and to educate ourselves. And sometimes that's all people need, is to be listened to.
Yeah, that is such a valuable tool. And also with our understanding and with our experience, do you not find that when we listen to people, I'm not really listening to what they're saying, because it's the unspoken narrative behind it, which is where you go, okay, now I'm beginning to understand.
I think when we look at the different levels of listening, and Phil and I teach this to the people that wish to develop personally, is that there are more, but we teach that there's 4 levels of listening. We've got the top level where the person's mind's always thinking about what they want to answer, or what they're having for dinner, or whether they're going out that evening, but they look like they're listening, but they're not really. Then the bottom level, the level below that, is where they are listening, but they're thinking about what would be really good to say in response to that. So they're listening, but they're always looking to put a gap to put their own pennies worth in.
Yeah.
They're listening to the facts and the figures, but they're not listening to the depth to it. And then as we go deeper down into that, we go to the 3rd level of listening, which can be subdivided again, where we are listening to somebody and we think we're getting it, and we are empathic to what they're saying. We think we're getting it. We're getting the behaviors and the patterns and what they're saying, but we can still arrive at a misconception because we've made a bit of an assumption because we haven't felt. And the bottom level, level 4, again, it can be subdivided out, is when we are really listening to the feeling, our gut instinct, listening to what their soul is telling us. And when we don't listen at a deep enough level, or take time to listen at that level, we can carry on regardless and not really hear what's going on. And in grief, a lot of the grief happens in the silence. Some people are very private with their grief and they won't want to call out the attention. Other people are very vocal with their grief and want to tell everybody. It makes no difference which one is displayed or any other version, because there was one of your listeners commented, we're all individuals and we all have the right to experience our grief. But if we're listening at that deeper level, we'll hear what the person needs.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I'm a level 4 listener then. That's great. Thank you.
He's jumped from 1 to 4. Look at that, ladies and gentlemen.
I know, it's brilliant. This is something over the last few years that I've noticed in my unfoldment. And people have stood there in front of me sometimes going, I'm not being derogatory, You know, the old cartoon thing, wah, 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 wah. And they're talking away, but I'm actually really not listening to what they're saying. But on that deeper level, you just go, okay, yeah, now I'm beginning to understand what you're saying.
Absolutely, and it's something that we don't just teach, but we actually practice as well. The last few years, we've been going through a ministership, and some of the pastoral counselling that we do is listening to people, not judging them, but listening to their words, feeling into what's coming to us empathically, and really going to meeting them at their level, in their place. And it really is insightful that you're able to see a whole new world and be in that place for them. So it's not just about listening and taking things in, it's holding a presence, it's holding a space for them that is really empowering for them, because it might be the one chance in life that they're going to be seen, heard and listened to. So I think it's a vital element of a medium's development to develop that listening skill, not just for the recipient and what they're going through, but also for those communicators, because we start to unfold the evidence even greater. We get a deeper delve into it because we've got that understanding.
Yeah. And quite often when we go into that level of listening, we hear where that's coming from, which can, and then you can actually understand the character maybe a bit more. You know, why is this person always bitter? But when you start cutting, you think, okay, well, why does this person painfully shy? Why would it, you know, I know you can do more, you've got that there, so what's the block? What's going on here? But yeah, it's fascinating. Thank you for that. I'm not mad. Oh, good. So fascinating. Anyway, we will touch on wonderful April. We are so looking forward to it. You are both down here in sunny Poole. It will be a beautiful weekend. There will be no storms, no snow. It will be lovely sunshine.
That's lovely to know that you have that kind of influence over the weather.
Oh, I do. I've got friends in high places, I can tell you. I have. We're probably going to have a tornado followed by a flood now. Never mind.
Blame Lawrence for that one. Yes.
Yeah. Yes. So in April, you're down with us here in Poole, and we have a one-day workshop on private sittings. I used to run a mile from a private sitting. My least favorite thing. But then I really sort of like discovered the value in them, not only of the enhancement of my own mediumship, but in the ability to be a little bit broader in our conversation than we can do in a public arena. So we have a lovely one day with both of you to enhance and expand that. Really important. If you want to, I was always told, if you want to improve your platform mediumship, private sittings.
Totally agree. Totally agree with that. For many years, doing several readings a day, every week, and it wasn't for money, it was for the experience. A lot of them I did free, because I realized it was the platform of the learning, to gain insight in many different ways to people, relationships that help me with the evidence when on platform, as quite rightly you said. But there's a skill to it. The private reading, as you said, some people loathe it, some people run a mile from it, some people love them, but it is a very important part of your development. And what we hope to do on that day is bring some techniques and skills to you to help you relax, to get into that space, to set the scene, if you will, to build that rapport very quickly with the recipient in front of you, but then to get you to be natural, follow and surrender the communication, and to unfold those evidences in such a way that it meets the needs, those several needs of that recipient in front of you. So it's not just a day of private sittings. We're going to really impart some knowledge. And a lot of the students we have with us that come back to us and say, I've joined this particular circle or this society or this group, and they want to place me as a professional medium, and we smile because we know what's coming next. It says that little bit you taught us at the beginning comes across so professionally. It just works every time. And we say that's why we brought it in from our coaching aspects, because it does make a difference in the private sitting, how you set that private sitting out. So this is what we want to share with you on that first day.
Yeah, brilliant. So looking forward to that. And if that's not enough for you, we have then a 2-day evidential mediumship workshop, which is going to be rounded off. So that's the Friday the 26th, Saturday the 27th of April. And that's a 2-day workshop with working with your evidential mediumship, followed by an evening demonstration for all of those who wish to, from the course, to carry forward into a public arena everything that you've learned in the last 48 hours. How fabulous is that?
Brilliant. But myself and Kerry are big advocates of giving people experience. Over the last 4 years, we've got, again, a number of students to demonstrate publicly, not because of the finished article, it's because it's the experience of doing it. And once they've got these techniques under wraps and they're being natural to who they are and how they work with the spirit world, it makes a huge difference, because those 2 days will be profoundly about building your confidence and understanding the knowledge of the spirit world and how those processes and mechanics take place. But as an individual, we need to do it in a natural way. And again, we'll share that. And I know Kerry's about to speak as well.
I thought I'd try, Phil. I know that some people have only ever demonstrated online, and there's nothing wrong with that. But when we demonstrate face to face, it's a different set of skills altogether. So we'll be looking forward to that. I've just noticed that one of our very close colleagues, and a medium in her own right, who is organising for us in New Zealand, Shirley Ann, is online. So Shirley Ann will be joining us in Australia. I think she's hopping over the water, but has also been key in organising the course with the South Auckland Church, which is a 5-day event in March.
Brilliant.
And Shirley Ann's also been demonstrating online on the Sunday gathering, and also in her own right. So she's probably able to say more about her learnings. Were she able to speak? But I'm sure the love heart on the end says it all.
Yeah,
it does. Do you still do Zoom, actually, Lawrence?
Yes.
Okay, because that Shirley Ann, there you go.
Oh, thank you.
She's a wonderful medium. We're very proud of her. She's a medium in her own right, spiritualist for over 30 years. A family brought her up in it, and she's incredible, and she's a dear friend as well. So.
Right. The only one thing is I was invited to work online for a church in Australia, and it did work out. The service started at 7:30 in the morning UK time. Lawrence isn't really a good morning person.
Do you know, Zoom is wonderful. Zoom is wonderful. Myself and Kerry have done 3-4 o'clocks in the morning. I know Shirley Ann's done the same thing. And people in Australia and New Zealand, they're incredible, the discipline, the dedication, because they go all through the night on workshops and progressive. It's incredible. So I've got nothing but devotion and envy for them. It's great what they do.
Yeah, well, I do apologise, Shirley Ann, but I'm a lazy pom. All right. I don't work before 10 in the morning. I'm retired, for goodness sake.
But we know Shirley Ann's willing to get up at any time. So if you're looking for an excellent medium, reach out to her.
Thank you. She's probably sat there going, no.
I bet she sat there going, yay!
Is it yay or nay, Shirley Ann? Let us know. In the meantime, thank you both so much. Wonderful evening. I do love these discussions because although we start with a topic, it, like our mediumship, unfolds. I especially like the part about the listening, and definitely with the grief side, and because we don't talk about some subjects, do we? We consider them a little bit taboo, or I don't want to go there. But in just as the conversation has unfolded, this is where we are, and obviously with Leslie, our thoughts with you, my dear, and being able to share that. Also with Jack as well, who has had that great loss in his wife, and just to be there in that time and just go, yeah, actually, I want to talk about how I feel and bring that out. So it's beautiful, beautiful,
Can I
beautiful.
add something in, Lawrence?
You can do anything you like, lovely Kerry.
I don't get the same privilege, do I?
No, you don't.
To those two lovely people and anybody else who is grieving at this time or is still grieving, there's no timeline to it.
Yeah.
Take time for you. Don't listen to anybody else who says, are you not done yet? Or should you not be doing this? Or should you not have done that? It's a very personal journey. So don't be pushed by popular thoughts and concepts about how this journey is. It's a very personal one, so make sure you do what feels right for you.
Yeah. And I hope this starts a trend as well, Lawrence and Jack and Leslie and Jennifer, who commented, and everybody else watching, that mediums, it's a lonely journey, but we should be sharing, we should be talking, we should be accommodating each other. I think days have gone where we get really stuck in the way that this is our work and this is how I do it. We need to share. We need to share experiences, because if we can, I know this world will be a better place. Mediumship will be a lot better as well. And I think the whole spiritual scene will be a lot better. For me, when I see mediums working, I love to go up and say, that was brilliant. How did you get that? And sometimes they will talk to me, and sometimes they'll shoo me away. For me, it's a passion, and I want to learn. I want to see. I want to gain that experience. So for me, I'm wishing that not just with grief, but everything, people start to share with each other and be kind to each other and help each other along the way. And it's been a privilege, Lawrence, to meet you. I know we met many years ago at a different church, very briefly, and to Stevie, who we've got to know very briefly. It's incredible, and all the other mediums out there that we're meeting as well. It's a real privilege to talk, discuss, share, and see each other work. And I've got nothing but admiration for each and every one of you that's doing the work for the spirit world.
And we make those connections, don't we?
Yes.
We're not we're not best buddies. We're not in each other's pockets every 5 minutes, but we make those connections. And then when things happen or questions are asked or somebody asks for help, you might, I don't know. Well, I'll tell you what, talk to so-and-so, because I know they're really good in that aspect.
Exactly.
Building this web all the time.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, thank you for inviting us on, Lawrence.
Yes.
Pleasure, but very briefly.
Well, we live in hope.
Jen, Lawrence has got the power, hasn't he?
Thank you, Jen. We'll wait and see. But anyway, in the meantime, thank you. Really good night. I've thoroughly enjoyed that. So looking forward. And it's this weird world we're in now. I know you, Kerry. I know you, Phil. But when I turn the corner and you're stood there physically, it's like, hello.
We met very quickly. We met somebody not long ago, and they've been online for us, and they were so excited to meet us. The person, if we would have given a glass of milk, it would have turned into a milkshake for about an hour. This young lady with Kerry and would not stop shaking. We had to say, pull it together. We're just normal people. But yeah, when we meet all these wonderful people we've been online, it's such a privilege to go, oh my God, you've got legs as well. You do have the legs. But no, it's wonderful to meet people, because you really get to see them to who they are.
Yeah. Brilliant. Thank you, everybody, for joining us tonight. If you would care to, tomorrow morning at 11 a.m. GMT, our service will be streamed live from the church here. and we have Sandra Atheris is taking that service. There's plenty of things going on online coming from Paul Church. Go on our website and look down the lists. We've just had it redesigned. I hated it to begin with, but I now love it because it was change. But it works well. But in the meantime, it's a very good night from me and from our guests.
It's a very good night from me as well. It's the Morecambe and Wise Show.
Yes.
And it's a very good night from him.
Take care, everybody. God bless.
Take care. Goodbye.
Bye.